Okay, now I know many of you know the candidates who are sitting up here, but in brief, here they are. Keith Amemiya currently serves as Executive Director of the Central Pacific Bank Foundation. He holds a law degree from UH Manoa and is a former head of the Hawaii Athletic Association. Ikaika Anderson is the former chair of the Honolulu City Council and oversaw the city's legislative branch and the council's $23.8 million budget. He represented District 3, Kailua, Kaneohe, and Waimanalo from 2009 to 2020. Sylvia Luke has led the House Committee on Finance for the last decade. An attorney in Honolulu with a law degree from the University of San Francisco, she has served in the House since 1999. Sherry Menor Mcnamara is president and CEO of the Chamber of Commerce of Hawaii, where she has worked in various roles since 2006. She holds a master's degree in business administration and a law degree, both from UH Manoa. And Seula Junior Topai, who I've been told to call Junior, is the senior pastor at Overcoming Faith Center in Hilo, where he has lived since 2007. Earlier in his career, he worked at the Hawaii National Guard Youth Challenge, Hilo campus, after receiving his master's degree in music from Washington State University. Thank you all very much for being here. Now we have electronically randomized the order in which each of you will answer each question. Today, you arbitrarily picked a number from a bowl to correlate with that order. As you know, you will have 3 minutes to answer each question. None of you has previewed the questions, and the questions are the same for each of you. As time permits, we will take questions from the audience for the last few minutes. So let's begin. The office of Lieutenant Governor carries few legal responsibilities. Why do you want this job? And we're going to go first to Sherry. I'm sorry, we're going to go first to Junior.
Junior.
Awesome. Let me do this.
No, it was Keith. It was Keith.
No, Junior goes first. It's number 4. We randomize it.
Well, aloha. Thank you again
Just
to the
remember
Rotary
your
Club
number.
for giving us the opportunity to come together. I'll start with a quote from Daniel Webster, the father of Noah Webster. He said, "I apprehend no danger to us from a foreign foe. Our destruction, should it come at all, will come from another quarter, from the inattention of the people to the conduct of their government. From our carelessness and negligence, I must confess that I apprehend some danger, and I fear we may place too implicit a confidence in our public servants and fail to properly scrutinize them, that in doing so, we the people may be made the dupes of designing men, and we become the instruments of our own demise. However, if we the people become intelligent, we will become vigilant. Give us the means and the knowledge to detect the wrong, and we will apply the remedy." What is the remedy? The first sentence of the Declaration of Independence: "When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them to another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal stations to which the laws of nature and nature's God have entitled them." What are these causes? We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they have been endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Among these rights are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that to secure those 3 rights, governments were instituted among men, deriving their just powers, not just powers, but just powers, from the consent, from the permission, from the authority of we, the governed, the people. And from our state constitution, Article 1, Section 2, it says that these rights cannot endure unless we, the people, recognize our corresponding obligations and responsibilities. It is our obligation, our responsibility, our duty to teach, to instruct, even at times to rebuke our servants. And when they cease to listen to the people, it's time for new servants. That is why I'm running for Lieutenant Governor.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Ikaika Anderson.
Aloha avakia kako. First of all, I'd like to thank you all very much for hosting this opportunity and allowing us all to come together in person and to talk story a bit with you this afternoon. I'm Ikaika Anderson, Democratic candidate for Lieutenant Governor, former chair of the Honolulu City Council. I'm seeking the Lieutenant Governor's office because I believe the office needs leadership. I can sum up the reason I'm seeking this office in one word: leadership. As the chair of the Honolulu City Council, I am the only elected executive who is seeking the office of the Lieutenant Governorship. As Lieutenant Governor, I look forward to build upon my experiences as the Council Chair to be able to bring Kauhale Village-style housing for our homeless population, and also being able to build more affordable housing across Hawaii. Our team worked together with the current Lieutenant Governor on the Hui Mahi Ai Aina project in Waimanalo. Today, there are dozens of formerly homeless people who are living on state property in Waimanalo, now living on a DLNR parcel, 10 acres in size. They have a communal place they can call their own, a roof over their heads, a door they can lock behind them at night to secure themselves and their property. We can do more of this across the state. The first official Kauhale project opened in Kalailoa last November, showing that this process can be duplicated. I also look forward to working with our team to be able to build more affordable housing. Our team required D.R. Horton, one of the largest developers in America, to provide, for the first time in that company's history, affordable rentals at Ho'opili. Today you have hundreds of affordable rentals there today, where Hawaii residents earning between 30% and 80% of area median income now have rental homes. These opportunities can continue across Hawaii if we have the right people in the executive branch of government. And our team looks forward to building upon my executive leadership and being able to provide additional opportunities for our homeless, for our working families, and to bring leadership that will complement the next governor as part of the next state administration. Look forward to today's discussion, and again, mahalo nui loa to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we go to Keith Amemiya.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Keith Amemiya, candidate for Lieutenant Governor, and I'm running for Lieutenant Governor because we need change. I'm the only Democratic candidate that's not a career politician or a lobbyist, and I'm also the only Democratic candidate who has executive leadership experience. I've led large statewide organizations with large numbers of employees, large budgets, where I was directly responsible for the bottom line and the welfare of our employees. I'm also the only candidate who dedicated his career or her career to public service. As the head of the Hawaii High School Athletic Association, I had the opportunity to visit 98 high schools, public and private, across the state and all of their surrounding communities. I got to know those communities well. I got to meet the leaders and working families across all of those communities. Those relationships will serve me well as your next Lieutenant Governor. I'm also the only Lieutenant Governor candidate who has a plan to clean up corruption at the Capitol. We will start by requiring term limits, banning fundraising during the legislative session, eliminating conflicts of interest, and requiring legislators to follow sunshine laws. We need to do those things before we can even address the issues facing our state today, including affordable housing, homelessness, and climate change. In terms of the Lieutenant Governor's position, I view that role as very important. It's the #2 position in the state. It's the person that will take the place of the governor if he or she cannot fulfill their duties. And I also believe that the challenges facing our state are far too great for any one person to do by him or herself. I will work side by side with the next governor to attack the issues that are facing many of our people across the state today. Many of our working families across the state are struggling, are suffering, and just have no hope for the future. We need to stop the out-migration of our younger families who are leaving the state in droves because they feel they can't make ends meet. Thank you for this opportunity, and I look forward to answering more questions today. Mahalo.
Thank you. And next, we'll hear from Sylvia Luke.
Thank you. Aloha, everyone. It's so great to be in a room with Rotary Club. When I was a high school student, because my mom couldn't afford to send me to college, I applied for a Rotary scholarship, and I was fortunate enough to get a Rotary scholarship. And I came to a luncheon like this, excited that, hey, you know, I'm gonna celebrate this, this gift that I'm gonna take to the University of Hawaii and get myself a good education. So I thanked them and I told them, this was back in 1985, and those people who are in the audience, you know what happened in 1985 and what happened in 1987. So 1985, I'm there and I'm telling the audience, thank you, I hope to join you. And then there were some snickers and laughs around the crowd, and you know why. Because women weren't allowed to be a Rotary member in 1985. It was in 1987 the law was changed. So I made it my mission to come back to the Rotary and say, hey, you know, I'm here, and I want to thank all the women leaders who are in this room, because change is hard. Change sometimes takes time, but you folks made it happen, and Rotary Club was one of the early ones that admitted women, so just congratulations to all that you do. The services that you provide in the community is not very unlike what we do in state government. In state government, you know how it is. Many of you work with state government, and working with state government is hard. Someone who has no experience in state government, don't know what the departments do, don't know where the silos are, where the challenges are. For somebody new not to have any state government experience to come in and say they're gonna do a good job, they're fooling themselves. I can tell you, I have 24 years of state government experience, the last 10 years as finance chair, and I watch your money. Every dime that comes in, I make it a point that whenever we make a commitment to spend, I say and I determine what's a priority. And a lot of times, many times I had to say no. And so I made a lot of enemies over the years, I'm sure. But in this election, even those people who I said no to are coming in to support me, because they know I set the priorities of the state as top priority, not different interests, not those individual interests, but I had to make those hard decisions. And that's what leadership is all about. When you are faced with those challenges, how can you make those decisions? And I made those decisions. I'm the only one who actually fulfilled the lieutenant governor's role, unlike anybody else. During the pandemic, the person that the governor really needed the most was me, whether to address the unemployment, whether to address different sectors. I'm the one who was there for him, and I will continue to be there and bring the skill set for the next governor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and that brings us to Sherry Menor McNamara.
I just want to apologize to Beth for causing confusion at the
fine.
beginning. Anyway, thank you so much for having us here. I especially am fond of the Rotary Club because my mom is a member of the Rotary Club in Hilo and has been for over 35 years. And I remember coming home from college and she would bring me to the Rotary Club meetings. I do know she had to pay a lot of fines though, so. But thank you. You know, why am I running for lieutenant governor? Well, if you ask yourself, and as I visit all the different islands, different communities, I ask them, is things getting better? Is the cost of living getting better? Is the cost of doing business getting better? Are job opportunities growing? And amongst the other challenges. And the answer is always a resounding no. So that is why I decided, what role can I play to a broader community to make a difference for the people of Hawaii? And for me, I believe that today, where we are at a defining moment in Hawaii. And now is a time for a fresh start with new leadership, new perspective, new ideas. And as president and CEO of the Chamber of Commerce for the past 16 years, another executive, we have worked closely with the public and private sector, including the legislature, community organizations across the islands, in coming up with innovative ideas. In fact, the most recent was the Hawaii Restaurant Card Program. That was created out of the chamber because of some innovative individuals in our membership. They came up with the Hawaii Restaurant Card, chamber pushed it forward, and fortunately, the administration granted $75 million that saved the restaurant industry and entire supply chains, such as farmers, ranchers, distributors, et cetera, and providing these cards to those who lost their jobs, and then stimulating an economy at a time that we really needed to. And so it takes that kind of innovative thinking, and so far government hasn't had that kind of perspective. And because I come from the business sector, I want to bring that into the conversation. And as Lieutenant Governor, I will work shoulder to shoulder with the governor in coming up with a comprehensive plan to address the cost of living, cost of doing business. How do we expand job opportunities? And I want to do that and partner with the governor because I respect the position of the governor. And because of my business perspective, I'd like to lead the effort on an economic recovery plan, a comprehensive one, so we can build an economy that's much more resilient. Focus on education workforce development initiative so that we can provide hope to our younger generation that there will be jobs out there, as well as helping to retrain those who did lose their jobs and are seeking other opportunities. And as the only candidate who was raised on the neighbor island, specifically Hilo, I want to serve as that liaison and bridge the communities across the islands with government. So that is why I'm running for lieutenant governor. And mahalo for this opportunity and look forward to the questions as well.
Thanks very much. And aside from having a good working relationship with the next governor, what would you do to be successful as lieutenant governor, and how would you make that position your own? And first we'll go to Sylvia Luke.
Thank you, Beth Ann. That's a really excellent question. As everybody knows, it's 3 branches of government. You have the judiciary, and you have the executive, and you have the legislature. The legislature makes laws. It's not the governor. The governor has to submit the bill request to the legislature. The legislature makes laws, and the legislature passes the budget. So it still comes down to the legislature and the working relationship with the legislature. And the last 10 years, because of my experience as finance chair, I was able to work across, not just with the 50 members of the House, but 25 members of the Senate. And you know how it is. When you're in elected office, you have a lot of personalities, and you bring together a bunch of egos, and you bring together different facets of the community, and you have to sort through all that. You really have to work together, know people's personalities, know where the weaknesses are, and know where the strengths are, and bring all those together, and figure out a way how we can get, not just work with the legislature, but actually go out to the community and bring those experiences back. I will bring a different skill set to this office, unlike anybody else. It's that relationship, and that relationship that goes deep with many of the legislative leaders who will be back next year. And they will continue to make policies for the state on behalf of the people, because they're the ones going out to the people, figuring out what some of the policies and priorities are. And I'm the only one who has that experience and who has that relationship, and I can really use that to strengthen that relationship between the executive and the legislature. Many times we know that we pass laws, but a lot of times the laws that we pass only becomes words on paper, or it becomes some kind of a statement if we don't get those things implemented. Because I helped pass some of these laws, including that all 3- and 4-year-olds would have access to early learning by 2030. It's the implementation that rubber meets the road. So I can take those experience, having worked with legislature, and implement a lot of those things that we as a community made it a priority and make that real. That's my commitment to this office, and I will continue to work hard to make sure that the words and aspirations are not just goals, but become reality for everybody.
Thank you. And next is Sherry Menor McNamara.
Thank you for that question, Beth. There's a lot that can be done with the lieutenant governor position. Once again, as I mentioned earlier, one, the lieutenant governor must respect the position of the governor and cannot compete with the policy agenda of the governor. And we've been hearing different policy agendas coming from different candidates, but the thing is, the reality is, we need to come up with one agenda. When we have competing agendas, then nothing will get done. And as lieutenant governor, I would like to serve that role to the governor, is to be that voice of the people and bring it back to the administration and let he or she know what the people are saying. And one way that I will do that is not for the community to come to the state capitol, which happens all the time. It's about going into the communities. And I will go to the communities from the northern part of Kauai to the southern part of Hawai'i Island, and all the communities in between, because it's important to we go there. All too often I've seen Honolulu-centric policies being considered, not neighbor islands. And a lot of times whenever I go to neighbor islands, I can appreciate that because I am from the neighbor island. I've seen how they're left out. And I hear that all the time on this campaign trail. So I, as Lieutenant Governor, will go out into the communities, keep that open communication line, bridge government and our people, because that's the utmost. Another area, in my current role, I've been bringing people together, stakeholders, from the legislature to community organizations to the private sector, and coming together and approaching it in a more collaborative way. And that's a skill set I would like to bring to the Lieutenant Governor position, is to be more collaborative. Because again, at the legislature, we see too often the same kind of ideas being circulated and not enough of going out into the community and listening and bringing those ideas to the table. Can you imagine if we brought those perspectives to the table, how much more we can do together, because it would be a much more inclusive agenda. And 3, because I come from that business perspective, and at a time when Hawaii needs to focus on economic recovery, I'd like to bring that into the conversation, because so far we haven't had any business people come into government and being part of that discussion. And I've seen it in the past couple of years during COVID, where there was a disconnect between the communities, different stakeholders, and government. Businesses, as well as the community, were the ones who had to implement what was being done, but no one sought to seek our input. And that's where I want to change the dynamics as Lieutenant Governor, is to help the governor, as well as work with the legislature in coming up with a much more inclusive, comprehensive agenda, so that it's not a Band-Aid approach, but one that will be much more resilient and sustainable for Hawaii.
Thank you. And thank you, Madam Timekeeper. Next, we go to Ikaika Anderson.
For 6 of the years that I served on the Honolulu City Council, I was a council vice chair, meaning that I was the complement to the Honolulu City Council chair and helping the council chair to put forth the agenda for the entire Honolulu City Council. I served with 3 different chairs of the council when I was vice chair. All of these chairs had very different leadership styles as well as different personalities. I wasn't the starting quarterback on the team then, and as Lieutenant Governor, I absolutely understand that my team and I will not be the starting quarterback in this position either. Rather, we'll be the starting running back. Our job will be to move the ball upfield and position the governor to be able to score the touchdowns. All our team cares about is the score at the end of the day, because when the scoreboard lights up, all of us are wearing the same jersey, and all of us win. But make no mistake, what can be done with the Lieutenant Governor's office really is up to the individual that's in the office, being able to prove to the governor 2 things. 1, that they're trustworthy, and 2, that they're competent. Because if the Lieutenant Governor is not both of those things, they're not going to be part of the decision-making of the executive team. And I can't emphasize the word team enough. When you're the Lieutenant Governor, you really are part of that executive team. What we can do with the office of the Lieutenant Governor is work with the governor on initiatives. We can partner on things such as bringing additional kauhale across our state. We can provide additional affordable housing opportunities. But in today's day and age, it's not enough just to have someone who understands numbers or who understands budgets. Believe me, as the chair of the Honolulu City Council, I understand both. I was responsible for running an entire branch of government that was responsible for the day-to-day needs of 1 million people on the island of Oahu. But the Lieutenant Governor's office is an executive elected position. When the governor leaves the state, we need to understand that she or he does not take the powers of the governorship with them. Stays right here at home with the Lieutenant Governor. So, if we have a natural disaster, a man-made disaster, and the governor's out of state, the Lieutenant Governor is on and needs to be ready to serve at a moment's notice. I would argue that it would be in the state's best interest to have someone as the Lieutenant Governor ready to step in as executive in chief, who's been there before, had to make those tough decisions, had to manage an entire branch of government through the COVID crisis, and someone who's been tried and tested. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we'll go to Junior Tupai.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that question, Beth. You know, for me, whether as a coach or an instructor with the Youth Challenge, as a pastor of a local church, or lieutenant governor, it's simply a title that shows a jurisdiction that you're serving. But this time we have a bigger broom, a bigger shovel to serve more of the people here in Hawaii. Now, for me, I'm not a politician. I consider myself a statesman. A politician thinks about the next election. A statesman thinks about the next generation. And that's what I'm looking for. You look at our state motto, Uamau Ke'el o Ka'aina I Kapono. The life of the land is perpetuated in righteousness. And I think a lot of people in our communities, as a pastor, now I'm not running for pastor of Hawaii, I'm running for lieutenant governor. But the same token, being afforded the opportunity to speak before hundreds of pastors across these islands and just seeing the disconnect of those in office and of those in the community, I feel as lieutenant governor, I could be that bridge to bridge the voice of the people to resonate and reflect what the people are speaking of within the communities, and to be able to regurgitate that, make that palatable for the governor to receive in the executive branch. Because over the past 2 years, we've seen it. There's been no sort of checks and balances, especially with the legislative branch and the executive branch. I feel I can work in that area to moderate and facilitate those two elements. You know, also, I think that we need to give the power back to the people. It must be of the people, by the people, and for the people. I'd work with the executive branch and with the legislative branch on how we can actually revamp some of these things. What am I talking about? Any position that is appointed, it should be elected by the people. Whether Board of Education, whether the sheriffs, we should have elected constitutional sheriffs in all 4 counties. We should put the power back in the hands of the people, because in the end, we are not a democracy, we are a constitutional republic. Let me break that down. What's the difference? A democracy, democracy. Demo means people or village. Krasi from the Greek word kratos, which means rule or strength. In a democracy, you elect people to rule by strength over you. In a republic, res publica, res meaning thing, publica meaning public. In a republic, you elect people to govern the things that are public, the grass of the parks, the road on H1, H3, or Cam Highway. But things that are private, your conscience, your faith, your dogma, your koko, the government should not touch in a republic. And as lieutenant governor, I'd work to have transparency. You know, we've seen a lot of corruption going on throughout our state. I'd look to, just like Sherry was saying, I'd look to also do the same thing, to have town halls in all the several neighbor islands, myself being from the Big Island, that we need transparency, but not just for Oahu-centric, but also for the neighbor islands as well. And just be, you know, have full disclosure so that everyone in our state and these islands know what's going on in Hawaii. Thank you. I yield.
Thank you. So guess who's next? Keith Amemiya.
Thank you. Before I discuss the roles and responsibilities of the lieutenant governor and how he or she can help the governor, let's talk about the political experience question. All of us do polling, from Junior to Sherry to Sylvia to Ikaika to myself. And beyond the horse race poll, you want to know what the issues of concern throughout the communities are. And you also ask about the qualities and values they want to see in our future leaders. And in terms of political experience, in my polling, and I'm sure in everyone else's polling, that comes in last or near last. They don't want political experience. They feel political experience is a detriment. They want new people. They want change. They have no faith in our experienced political leaders, because look at the metrics, or look at how our younger families feel. They don't feel things have gotten better in the last 20 years or so. They don't feel that there's hope for the future, for whether it's our children or our grandchildren. They clearly want new leadership. They clearly want change. And that's why I'm advocating for campaign reform at our legislature. Let's impose term limits. Let's make sure that they can't fundraise during the legislative session. Let's eliminate their conflicts of interest, and let's require them to abide by sunshine laws like everybody else is required to abide by. In terms of how we can engage the public, I advocate for an Office of Community Engagement. Their sole responsibility is to go out in the communities, listen and learn, and view the community as partners. Too often, legislators and other elected officials view the public as a nuisance. and that they all need to just deal with insiders or lobbyists, and that's the route to go in terms of deciding what's best for our state. We've gone far astray from what we need to do. We're out of touch, or at least our elected officials are out of touch with our communities, and I'm going to rely on my experience as the head of the Hawaii High School Athletic Association, a member of the Board of Education, and many other statewide organizations I've had the privilege of serving. As I mentioned in my earlier remarks, I've been in every community for the last 25 years. I've worked in those communities. I understand the issues and concerns that they have. I haven't just gone to all of these communities in the last 6 months because I'm running for lieutenant governor. I've been in those communities for the last 25 years because I care about those communities. I'm interested in their issues and concerns, and I want to solve them. Thank you.
Thank you. You're all being so great about time. Thank you.
We don't want the alarm to go off.
Good point. For decades, Hawaii has faced most of the same issues that face us now, and those issues are interrelated. If elected, what would be your signature issue, and how would you focus on it? And first, we're going to go back to Keith Amemiya.
Well, as you framed the question, for decades, we've had the same issues and concerns. For decades, not much has been done about it. That's why we need change. That's why we need to reform campaign spending laws and the like. And that's why we need to engage our communities and get them involved. For far too long, we've ignored the issues and concerns of people across the state. In terms of working families, there are many here, and we know we're neighbors with. We're related to working families. So many of them are leaving our state because they've given up hope. They can't make ends meet. One of the issues is, of course, Hawaii has become largely unaffordable for the vast majority of people. Over 50% of people who live in our state are one paycheck away from falling into serious financial trouble, poverty, or even bankruptcy. That's a very stressful situation, obviously. What if you get sick and can't work? Or what if you have a family member that's sick and you need to pay their medical bills? What if you want to send your child to college? There are so many issues facing our state that we've just been unable to address. I mean, we can rattle off how many people have left the state in the last 3 years, how much inflation has gone up, how little our minimum wage has gone up, how much our housing prices have greatly increased. So one of the issues that we need to address is to build more affordable housing. By far, that's the biggest expense facing families across the state. Whether you own a home or you just want to rent a place or an apartment unit, the cost is way too high. It's way too much a part of your monthly expenses. So let's start building homes. Let's just not talk about it. I've been around for quite a while. I've been born and raised in Hawaii. I've heard that we need to build more affordable housing when I was in elementary school. I mean, what have we done about it? It's just frustrating, it's exasperating. And the final point I'm gonna make is not only are young families moving out of our state in droves or thinking about moving, our kupuna are now thinking about moving out of state or having to move out of state. They have fixed incomes, they can't generate any more income, yet their rent increases, yet their food costs are increasing, yet their gas costs for their car is increasing. They're giving up hope, and that is a tragedy that people who've worked hard their whole life want to stay here, want to be with their families and their grandchildren, just don't have the opportunity to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. And next we'll move to Sylvia Luke.
Thank you. Thank you for that question. In 2019, after looking at a study that the AUW and Bank of Hawaii Commission we looked at what are the biggest cost drivers for the state of Hawaii. They came up with several things. One was housing, one was childcare, another one was transportation, taxes. Those are the major things that we needed to help the various communities. So looking at that report, what I did was I gathered many executives, private sector folks, community leaders, and business leaders, and also advocacy groups. And we brought together a group of people to talk about various issues. Because it's one thing to say we're gonna solve affordable housing or homeless. We need to know exactly what those things are. And we need to figure out, okay, are there barriers? Are there regulatory barriers? Are there tax barriers? Are there money barriers? It's one thing to just talk about it. It's another thing to gather people and have a conversation. So we spent the entire 2009 in the fall to come up with various issues. And 2020, I not only brought the community and the advocates and business leaders together, I brought together the House and Senate leadership. We broached this idea with the governor, and it was the first time, because of the leadership that I provided, the House, Senate, and the governor agreed to pass 4 sets of bills to deal with affordable housing, to make sure that all 3- and 4-year-olds would have access to early learning, to make sure that we have tax equity, and the last thing is to build a new development scheme that would clear through some of the regulatory burdens. 2020, we had this commitment. What happened in 2020? In March, the entire state shut down, but we were ready to go. So what we did, we had to handle what was in front of us. Through the pandemic, I worked side by side with the governor to deal with many of the issues that faced the state, whether it was rental, whether it was unemployment. I'm glad Sherry brought up the idea for the restaurant card. The idea of a restaurant card they brought was Aloha Bucks. The reality is that they didn't go to anybody else. They came to me. They came to me because they knew out of everybody, regardless of the governor, regardless of who's in the legislature, they knew that I would get it done. And in 2020, when we were finally able to provide some of the resources, what I did was went back to the commitment we set up in 2020 after bringing many of the community stakeholders together to put aside $300 million to build 5,000 homes, to make sure that $200 million go to preschool, and I will continue to work hard to address these important issues.
Thank you. Moving now to Junior Tupai.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Beth. You know, Einstein said insanity is doing the same thing, expecting different results. You know, a lot of times we have rhetoric, we have different empty, slogans, whatnot. And I do agree with Keith, as far as it's the same trajectory, the same thing that's been happening, year after year, election cycle after election cycle. For me coming in, one thing I'd actually look at is actually the economy. We look at our economy, we're the highest place to live in, the highest tax state or the second highest tax state, the hardest place to start a small business. What are different variables that we can actually address and try to amend to alleviate this? I think the first one, of course, the Jones Act. I don't want to go into too much detail with that, but we need to look at amending that, work with the federal level to actually somehow amend this thing, which was made actually when Hawaii was a territory. We are now a state. We need to change with the times. I think the second thing is look at our taxes. I think Winston Churchill said it best. He said, a state or a nation that tries to tax itself into prosperity is like a man standing in a bucket trying to lift himself up by the handle of that bucket. That is what Hawaii has been doing. We need to look at two things in particular. Let's look at the general excise tax and also the income tax. We need to address those things, have open dialogue. How can we actually amend that, or maybe even put in a flat rate for Kama'aina, for the general excise tax, which is very particular here specifically to Hawaii. Whether taxing, carpentry, painting, attorneys, all these different fees, all these different services, when we should be more of a retail tax or the excise tax towards tobacco, etc. With the income tax here in Hawaii, it's 11%, which is second only to California, which is 13.3%. I mean, look at New York, they're 8.8% in their income tax. So for us, we need to look at alleviating those things. I think, what does it say? That governments do not create wealth, they consume it. It is the people who create wealth. And we need to provide the incentive of tax cuts to allow them to produce that wealth. So here in Hawaii, we need to look at the economy, specifically that with the taxes, bring that down, less government, put the power back in the hands of people. I keep saying that. It sounds like rhetoric, but at the same time, we need to change the ideologies and the paradigms that we have been going on. I said it earlier, I'll say it again. Insanity is doing the same thing, expecting different results. If we want to change the trajectory of our state, let's put new people, fresh perspectives in office. Thank you.
Thank you. And that brings us to Sherry Menor McNamara.
Thank you. Before I give my answer, I'd like to clarify some facts with the Hawaii Restaurant Card Program. We actually approached Senator Wakai and Senator De La Cruz, amongst others, but we didn't get any answers from the legislature. There was a stall, and I will say that you did like the idea, but it stalled, and we weren't hearing anything. So as a chamber, as an advocacy organization, we continue to speak up and continue to come up with these innovative ideas. And finally, Governor Ige and administration say, hey, what can we do? So we presented the idea of formerly Aloha Bucks that turned into Hawaii Restaurant Card, and he loved it. So we're lucky that he allocated $75 million of the CARES funding, and that's when DBID formed this group to put together that included the Restaurant Association, Hawaii Ag, as well as DBID officials, amongst other stakeholders, and I know you came in after, and then we did get that done together. But this is an example of when we work together, we can get things done. And that's the kind of lieutenant governor I want to be, is to get things done by collaborating with various stakeholders. The one thing that I would want to focus on, and after discussion with the governor, is to focus on an economic recovery plan so that we can build a more sustainable economy. And that includes looking into opportunities as to how do we diversify our economy. We've been talking about that for years, but here's an opportunity to really have these discussions, and one way to do that is to bring the people together. And part of economic recovery is, again, to think long-term. I want to continue to focus on education and workforce development initiatives. We're doing that right now with the chamber as well as the community organizations, university, educators, students, teachers, in work-based learning opportunities to get them exposed of what's out there and get them excited about what kind of jobs they can look forward to, and then preparing them for those jobs so that we can keep our keiki here so that they don't have to move away. But if they do move away, to have them come back here because those opportunities will be available. Also, seek different initiatives that will support our small and local businesses because they are the heartbeat of our economy. They are the fabric of our communities. And I don't think the government has done enough to help support them. And we need to change that. And I want to bring that perspective and experience into the conversation. And again, serve as that voice between the neighbor islands and government, as well as Oahu, so across the islands. But again, this will be after discussion with the governor and to see what his or her role or thoughts are of what lieutenant governor can do to support the governor, work with the legislature, and ensure that whatever we do is for the people of Hawaii across the islands.
Thank you. And that brings us to Ikaika Anderson.
Thank you. You know, it's a typical state legislative response: working group, task force, study, paralysis by analysis. The project I talked about earlier, Hui Mahi Aina in Waimanalo, you had a group of homeless people who were squatting on state-owned property. The residents of Waimanalo didn't approach the state. They approached Honolulu Hale and asked for help because the state threw up its hands and did nothing, absolutely nothing. Now, I could have formed a task force, a working group. If I did, we'd still be talking about this problem. I did what leaders do. I went down to the site. I then went into the community. My team talked with community members. We identified Auntie Blanche McMillan, a community leader. She said, I have a 10-acre piece of property that's state-owned, but I don't know if the state's going to let me do what we need to do. So then my office approached the lieutenant governor. The lieutenant governor said, let me work with DLNR. Now you have Hui Mahi Aina that was established in a matter of months. Working group, task force, study, Doesn't work, folks. Doesn't work. Now, I never served a day in the state legislature, but the man who raised me, my grandfather, did, 20 years. I spent 5 years as a staff member at the legislature, long enough to know how the legislature works. It's part of the reason I'm running for lieutenant governor. Paralysis by analysis doesn't cut it. Look at how the city and county of Honolulu has tried to work on our homeless initiatives. Thomas Square, we all remember Thomas Square? Tents, campsites, unpermitted, illegal. The city and county of Honolulu went in, moved people out. Not just kicked them out, but we actually provided services for these folks, similar to what Hui Mahiai Aina does. Found a location, provided wraparound services. Look at Thomas Square today. Absolutely beautiful. But it's because Thomas Square is under the jurisdiction of the city, not the state. If we're under jurisdiction of the state, it probably still looked like it did a few years ago. Hui Mahiai Aina Waimanalo is a shining example of what can be done when we stop the studies, stop the talking, stop the working groups. We can do so much more if we simply actually do the work and stop talking. I look forward to being able to work with our team also on the affordable housing issue, real workforce housing, like we were able to accomplish at Ho'opili, hundreds of units that our team brought into fruition for families earning between 30% and 80% area median income. We're not saying we want to do it, we're saying we did it. And we can duplicate this process across the state if we stop the talk and move towards action. Thank you.
Thank you all. COVID-19 is moving from pandemic to endemic. Many professionals in the mental health community believe that people, that's children through adults, may still feel the psychological effects of the pandemic into the future. In your signature issue that you talked about a little while ago, what role does mental health play and how will you support it? And first, we're going to go to Sherry Menor Mcnamara.
Mental health is critically important. And the legislature has not allocated enough funding to mental health. We saw a lot of monies being allocated this past session, but why only this past session? We should have been thinking about this a long time ago. Issues that we brought up earlier, cost of living, cost of doing businesses, where our keiki are now, our kupuna, all of those. We should have been working on this a long time ago and coming up with this comprehensive plan, not a piecemeal. And mental health is a huge factor, and sometimes an underlying factor. Because if we don't have good mental health, we're not gonna have a good economy. So that's one of the driving forces, and we must invest more in that. And then not only looking at the legislature for funding, but also working with organizations to deal with mental health. Finding out what we can do between the public and private so that we can build a healthier climate, healthier economy, and healthier people. I think we focus too much on the physical aspects, but the mental health is sometimes so much more. And with the recent news that Hiro did, the report, it is sobering. But that's why we need to do even more, invest more, and ensure that we start communicating and working with each other to focus on this issue. And as Lieutenant Governor, I will ensure that we bring these stakeholders together, so we start talking with each other and being at the table to come up with a comprehensive plan and solutions to address this issue, but many other issues that have been far too long and it's happening far too long and nothing being done. But I have hope for the state. I believe in the state, and I know all of you do. And everyone will play a role in making our state better. I decided to jump into this race because that's where I felt I could make the most impact and contribution. And I know you have your role too. And that's all of us to find within ourselves so that we can become more engaged and do better for Hawaii. So let's believe again. Let's restore that hope and optimism. But we will need to, again, go circling back, because mental health is one of the driving factors that determines where our future will be. Mahalo.
And next we'll go to Ikaika Anderson.
Mental health is a huge issue here in Hawaii. Absolutely huge issue in Hawaii. Many of our families have been touched by mental health, mine included, where I had to step in and do what was necessary to provide for the mental health needs of an immediate family member. Very, very trying, especially on children. How can we make the situation better? I do believe that we need to re-examine state law to allow for those who are mentally ill, living unsheltered, to be committed where they can seek help, by force if necessary. I'm even willing to examine the possibility of doing that. And when I advocated for such on the Honolulu City Council, remember, many people on Oahu told me I was evil, I was cruel, I was a devil, I was going to hell, because I was unkind, that the council was unkind. But I believe with every fiber of my being that it's far more unkind to leave these folks on the street, subject to their own devices, without the health care and the help that they need. In Kaneohe, my team was proud to work with H4, the nonprofit H4, Hawaii Homeless Healthcare Hui, and the good team that is headed by Dr. Scott Miskovich to establish the Kaneohe Joint Outreach Center with our good friend Senator Jarrett Kehokalole. Again, an initiative, what can happen when county government, state government, and the nonprofit sector come together. We didn't talk about it, we didn't form a study group, we went and did it. We found the property, we found the doctors, we found the community advocates. And the Kaneohe Joint Outreach Center performs very similar services as to what's available here in Chinatown, where homeless folks who need the help, need the medication, need the services, are identified and brought in to help them. That's how we do this. We go and we move community by community by community. But when you take this approach, you work with community leaders in every single community, rather than sitting in Honolulu saying, you folks in Kaneohe, the folks on North Shore, we in Honolulu know what's best for you. No, absolutely not. We go out into the affected communities and partner with them. As a Honolulu City Council member, I represented Honolulu on the Hawaii State Association of Counties, working with our colleagues on every island across the state. Look forward to being able to open joint outreach centers across the state, as was done in Chinatown, as was done in Kaneohe, so we can serve our homeless ohana. Again, this is something that's been done, and we can continue to expand it. Thank you.
Thank you. And going now to Keith Amamiya.
Thank you. Junior, I hope I have the opportunity to attend one of your sermons, because you even got me pumped up. You're a great speaker, and I agree with you on your Einstein saying. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over, but expecting a different result. I'll take it one further. The definition of insanity is electing the same officials over and over and expecting a different result. In terms of legislative accomplishments, before I get to mental health, I mean, let's think about this. Whatever strides were made this past session, that's great, but it shouldn't take a pandemic. It shouldn't take reapportionment. It shouldn't take every legislative official to be up for election. It shouldn't take people running for higher office. It shouldn't take a windfall of federal stimulus money to bring change. If we had consistent change, if we listened to the people, if we cared about working families for the last 20 years, maybe we wouldn't be in such a deep hole like we are today. Mental health is a sensitive and important issue for me. As some of you may know, my mother has suffered from severe mental illness for basically her entire adult life. Like many of you who have a family member with mental illness, it's very frustrating. There's clearly not enough mental health services made available in our state. There's clearly not enough laws that are designed to help people who are mentally ill. The bar to help someone like my mother, to get her the medical treatment, the medications that she sorely needs, is way too high. So we're forced to have people like my mother live on her own, where we all need to worry about her constantly. We have to tend to her constantly. Now, some of you may ask, well, why didn't you take her in? Well, for various reasons, it was not a good option. We had a young child. It was not a safe environment to have her and my son as an infant, as a toddler, in the same household. So I spent the last 30-something years of my life worrying about my mother every day, multiple times a day, frustrated that she can't get the care she needs. So yes, I agree with everyone on this panel. We need to address mental health. We need to actually put money towards mental health treatment services, because there's clearly not enough of that out there today. Fortunately, my mother, or unfortunately, she became physically unable to care for herself, so she was required to get, she was bedbound and not independent, so now she's in a care home in Eva Beach. And at least I know she's safe and sound in a secure environment every night, and I don't have to worry about her every day. We need more mental health treatment services across the state. Thank you.
Thank you. And Junior Tupai, over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Beth. And yes, sir, Keith, whenever you're in the Big Island, just stop by. Service at 8:30. I would digress, though. I do agree with Ikaika. I do feel that we need to have dialogue as far as with mental health issues, to have them court-ordered. Some of them do not have the mental capacity to actually acquiesce to checking themselves into these treatment centers, and we need to explore some of those things. I know for the mental health issues, that also correlates with the homeless or the houseless issue as well. I think according to UCLA California Policy Lab, 3/4 of the people living on the streets, in cars, or in tents are either suffering from serious drug addiction, mental health issues, or both. And the three demographics specifically are men, women, and veterans, which is, that's ridiculous. And one of the biggest ways we can actually solve this, I know I was actually talking to Kathleen earlier before this. Thank you for this. We do need to increase the bed capacities, have more beds within our hospitals, and not just within the state. I think a lot, she was saying, like the state hospitals, seems like you have to commit a crime in order for you to be even admitted into this. Whereas with the private sector, we can actually explore that to actually put more people in there. I also know we do need more funding with the mental health demographic. I know as far as Americans, only 23% of Americans actually are satisfied with our health care here in America. And I think only 20% of the people, they feel that maybe 20% of actually what we're spending on our healthcare system is wasteful. So I do think we need to revamp our healthcare system. One of the things we need to improve on is actually the response time, not just with the mental health workers, but also with HPD, different EMTs, to actually get over to these people actually suffering from these mental health issues. I do think part of the solution is actually within the community. It is not more government agencies, but it's actually empowering the community didactics, whether faith-based groups, mental agencies, nonprofits that address mental health issues, also indirectly job skills, emotional needs, to where we can actually prepare these people to come back and be calibrated back into the society. But I do think, I agree with everyone else here on the panel, that it is something that is a huge need here in Hawaii, that we do need to have some serious dialogue and come up with the answers. And I do believe the solutions are already in the community. It's in the community groups. Me as a pastor, going back to this real quick, we believe that the church should solve homelessness. We believe that community groups should be solving the mental health issues, not more government programs. The government should take their money and put it into the communities and have them solve it, because they've already done the research, they've done the footwork into the policies that need to switch and change. Oh, my time. Thank you so much. Mahalos.
And for our final answer, Sylvia Luke.
Thank you. Thank you. This is a prime example of individuals who have no state experience to address, try to attempt to address this issue. Relating to mental health, we have already built up the state hospital. Right now, the state hospital has 144 beds waiting. What we need to do is make sure that it gets open to treat those individuals who are non-crime related. So this bed, the 144 beds, needs to be pretty much set aside for non-criminal related patients. What's going on in the community right now is whether you're at Queens or whether you're at St. Francis, the homeless population with mental illness are going to the private hospitals and taking up beds. And the private hospitals have only so much capacity to deal with these individuals, and some of these individuals need to be committed. Again, commitment process has been passed. What we need is we're working with a group of lawyers to make sure that guardian ad litem, so it's somebody other than that individual becomes the guardian to speak for that individual. I'm a friend of Chad Koyanagi. Chad Koyanagi is one of the only street psychiatrists. He goes to Chinatown, he goes and visit many of the homeless individuals and make friends with them and get their confidence to administer medication. Remember, for those of you who worked in downtown, remember the woman who had tons and tons of bags, and she would basically, roll it across, and, some of us have to go and help her push her cart across. Chad Koyanagi actually gained her confidence, and now she's living in a home where she's stable and she needs medication, and we need a stable facility like the state hospital, which we already funded. What we also need to do is, other than the mental health services that we provide through hardworking people at Department of Human Services, is we need to go and provide additional funding for the providers, the private providers like IHS and Catholic Charities and others that go out and do the outreach. We know what needs to be done. In addition, we have to make sure that the homeless population have somewhere to go. The thing is, we continue to look at just continue of care, whether it's from street to finding a place for them to live. But what they really need is dedicated wraparound service for them to be administering all through the system. And so I look forward to continuing the work that we have built.
Thank you all. All right, now I want to give you all a chance to ask some questions. Also, all of our folks who are on Zoom. So I have someone who's going to be sending me questions from Zoom, and we will go back and forth between this room and Zoom as long as we have some Zoom questions, which so far we don't have. Now, if your voice is loud enough, go ahead and stand up. If not, we'll get you a mic. There it is. Thank you so much.
So the state has a terrible reputation of actually spending federal dollars. Right now, the state has lapsed money for year after year for DOH, for DOT, for DOE, and then we lose this money. What would you guys do to better be efficient in the state of Hawaii to use this money? Because right now, there's disabled people who are not getting vehicles. It's federal dollars, and they're not getting vehicles, and they've been waiting for years. What would you folks do individually to actually efficiently spend the money?
That can be for everyone or anyone who wants to take that question. Sylvia Luke, how about 2 minutes to answer, or a minute?
Thank you. One of the things I would like to do is create a federal maximization office alongside the lieutenant governors. One of the things that the lieutenant governor's role is, which is actually in statute, is figuring out how to address some of the regulatory burden. Federal maximization, I look at that as a regulatory burden. Whether it's in DOE, many times, monies that can be addressed for special needs where it's left on the table, and we have to go and talk to the DOE, encourage them, actually put benchmarks for them to go and grab this money. For a similar sized state like Idaho, with similar number of population, they have been able to get about $30 million for special needs. Hawaii has only gotten $500,000, which is really ridiculous. So over the years, we've been cracking down DOE. And whether it's DOE or even the Department of Human Services, Department of hell, there are monies that can be grabbed that we're leaving on the table. So I will be helping to create what's known as a federal maximization office to ensure that Hawaii gets our fair share of federal funds.
Thank you. Anyone else want to answer?
Sure, I'll answer. I don't think we need to create any more positions in government, but I do believe the lieutenant governor can play a role in working with the our federal congressional delegation, state leaders, and our counties to ensure that these dollars are being spent efficiently, expeditiously, and effectively. And a lot of times we put the federal dollars that's supposed to come in, we don't spend it, in that way. Take, for example, the most recent news was DOE. There was a bunch of monies, I think more than millions of dollars out there that didn't go to cover student lunches or meals. And that's wasteful spending when we could have utilized that. And why is this happening? And so that's where I believe the lieutenant governor can play a role to ensure that every dollar is spent. In fact, I believe it was the Hawaii Data Collective that came up with a federal tracking system that showed where all the CARES money went, each dollar, what program, and took it a step further, how it impacted the communities and benefited communities. So we can have some kind of tracking system to ensure that each dollar is spent. I think that would be helpful, and as Lieutenant Governor, I want to help implement that.
Thank you. Anyone else want to answer that question? Keith, go ahead.
Well, this is yet another example of a lack of leadership in government. I mean, the failure to spend federal dollars that are free for us, amounting to millions and millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars, is unconscionable. And we need to finally hold people in powerful positions responsible. Where's the accountability? This is another issue that has been going on for years and years and years. And as I said earlier, it shouldn't take an election year for all of these great, bold ideas to take place. These should have been done a long time ago. Thank you.
Thank you.
As the chair of the Honolulu, thank you. As the chair of the Honolulu City Council, when the city got our federal dollars, my office established the Economic Assistance and Revitalization Committee that was chaired by my colleague, Tommy Waters. We didn't create another agency within the legislative branch. We relied on a colleague who had some expertise with funding and to be able to move that funding out. Councilmember Waters, now Council Chair Waters, an executive himself, was able to work with the city administration on behalf of the Honolulu City Council and identifying priorities where these monies could go, and also being able to go out into the communities to find those places, those programs, those needs that needed to be met. And again, we did this without creating another layer of government. We simply identified someone in the existing legislative branch to be able to go out and get that done. As Lieutenant Governor, we have the availability of staff positions that we would be able to designate, find someone with that expertise, and simply add that to their job description. We don't need to create an entire new department to go ahead and do this. As an elected executive, our team has those experiences, and we would rely upon them to be able to move forward in the Lieutenant Governor's office, just as we did as Council Chair. Thank you.
Junior, you want to say? Go ahead. Go ahead and
I'll
answer.
just add a little bit of it, but just to digress to what Sylvia had said, if there are 144 beds, and why hasn't it been addressed yet? If we already know the solutions and the answers, we should meet the grievances and have resolutions and solutions already done. As far as for this question, I'd like to look into doing audits actually for all these different, where all the monies have been going. For example, even with the DOE, if they received $927 million in COVID funding, only 27% has been spent. We need to know where these hard-earned tax dollars are being spent and where they're being funneled to. I don't believe the issue is the money, but it's actually the didactics and where it's being funneled to. We need to look at all these things and be full disclosure for all the people. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We've got a question from Zoom asking, will all candidates be filing information on the League of Women Voters 411?
Yes.
Yes, I've already been working with my committee on doing that. Yes.
Yes, we're in the process of filling that out.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, that's the shortest question and answer series we've had all day.
Thank you for that.
Thank you very much. I have a very quick answer question as well. And it's been wonderful to hear where you stand on issues, very important issues that are facing the state of Hawaii. But there's one very decisive issue that I have not heard from anybody on. And I'm talking about the 30-meter telescope. We all know the Lieutenant Governor's position is a very successful pathway to being governor, which ironically wasn't mentioned today. And all I need to hear from you folks is, I support, I don't support, and I haven't decided, really. Thank you.
And thank you, Tom, because we also had that same question from someone on Zoom, and that was going to be the next question. Thank you. So I'll tell you what, why don't we start in reverse? So Junior, you go first, and we'll come back this way.
Awesome. 1 minute? Thank you. If they're going to put something up there, they should clean up the Opala they already have up there. 11 existing telescopes right now. They promised to clean them, take them off. Yes, but I believe in astronomy. I believe in science. I also believe in forward thinking, but at the same time, we need to bring the past as well with us. If we don't remember the past, what happens? We can never move forward. Thank you.
Go ahead.
I do support astronomy, and TMT is part of it, so I do support TMT. Not only does it bring more than $200 million to Hawaii's economy, it also provides opportunities and education. We talk about diversifying our economy. Here's an industry that's a stable industry, and moreover, we teach STEM in schools. But if we don't have jobs in this area, where will our keiki go? So this is a prime opportunity to leverage astronomy and provide the type of job opportunities that will be available for our students and be able to stay here because astronomy will be here. And third, it will put Hawaii on the map, and we should be proud of that because Hawaii is the best place. And it will showcase to the world what Hawaii is and what can do and what they can offer. But I do want to acknowledge there's more deeply rooted issues behind this, and that's something we need to continue to address and work together on.
Thank you. I support astronomy and the construction of the TMT. Recently, Mcnamara Foundation donated a telescope to Waipahu High School, and there's a pathway for Waipahu High School students to go and look in the telescope and then work with people on Mauna Kea to look at data, and that's really an exciting pathway. So these are opportunities for kids that they've never had before, so we're very excited about that.
Ikaika, go ahead.
Thank you. I do support astronomy, and I believe that there's more than enough room on the Mauna for both astronomy and culture to be able to thrive together. As Junior mentioned, I do have to agree with him that there is much Opala on Mauna Kea already, and there's been commitments made, there have been promises made, and unfortunately they've turned out to be empty commitments and empty promises to clean up the Opala that's there. That needs to be addressed. That needs to be addressed before, or at the very least in conjunction with building anything else. That Opala needs to be addressed. But there is room for culture and astronomy on Mauna Kea, provided that those things happen. I'd also like to commend State Representative David Tarnas of Hawai'i Island, who was elected by Hawai'i Islanders, for his work on this initiative. He's really brought some solid community people together. Thank you.
Whenever we have an opportunity to be the world leader in an important industry, I'm supportive of it. Whenever we have the opportunity to learn more about our universe, I'm in support of it. Whenever we have the opportunity to boost the economy of Hawaii Island with high-paying jobs, I'm in support of it. Having said that, there are many Native Hawaiian issues and grievances that have been brought up as a part of the Mauna Kea discussion, and those issues and concerns cannot be ignored. I firmly believe that we can get both sides to meet and reach a compromise so that we can build the telescope and yet address the issues and concerns facing our Native Hawaiian communities today. Thank you.
All right, everybody, how about a big round of applause for our panelists up here, our Lieutenant Governor candidates. Very informative, very insightful. To our MC, Beth Ann Kozlovich, thank you so much for your time to make this afternoon a success.